So we're going to kick things off with probably the most common question I get. I think I've gotten this question probably about 20 times more than any other question. Why does it look like I keep looking up and down? So here's the main reason. One, I'm looking at my notes and my questions that you guys sent in prior to me starting the live. And two, I'm actually going off two cameras. So I'm on live here on Instagram, but also on YouTube, Facebook, Periscope, and something else, and a couple others. So there's actually two cameras. So that's why I keep looking up and down. Hope it's not too distracting. So we're going to jump right in and start with nothing to do with fantasy, but still something to do with football. So as you know, I make my picks for Thursday's game. I'll put that out today. And then Saturday night or early Sunday morning, I put out my straight up picks for the entire slate of games for the week in the NFL. Last week, had a pretty good week, 16-0. So full transparency, week one was 11-5, but I think we're starting to get our groove, and obviously 16-0 is something I want to talk about. So look for the straight up picks coming out this week, Saturday night on Instagram and Twitter. I'll send out the full sheet, send it out to you, and let me know if you agree or disagree with those picks. So to fantasy, we're going to start by giving you some startups, some sits, some sleepers, and then a boom or a bust for each position, followed by one of the questions that was sent in, and obviously any of your questions that come in as we're talking. So we're going to start with the first one. Start them in the quarterbacks. So we'll start with quarterbacks. So your first start this week is going to be Cam Newton. So Cam Newton is, I guess he's back, right? Like, we weren't sure what we were going to get from him this year. We knew that the Patriots were going to try to use him, obviously, in the running game. We weren't sure what we were going to get from his arm. He looked a little bit rusty in week one. But after that second week in Seattle, I think Cam Newton might be back. So barring any injuries, Cam Newton is a definite start in week 3. The next one, and this is another one, coming off an injury, missed pretty much all of last season. Ben Roethlisberger. I think the first 2 games he was kind of feeling out the game a little bit, making sure he was okay. He could take a hit, all the typical stuff that you face when you come back from an injury. He was kind of dealing with. He's back as well, and he's got weapons, and we'll talk about some of them later on. That's going to help him be successful, specifically in fantasy. So Ben Roethlisberger, again, and against that Houston defense, if that's important probably to mention, he's going to be poised for a big game this week. Your sits for the quarterbacks. So in the same game as Ben Roethlisberger, you have Deshaun Watson. Your instinct's going to be to play him. How do you sit him? But he's a sit this week. That Pittsburgh defense is for real. And I think Deshaun Watson, if you have an alternate for him, so assuming you're not like in a 2 QB league or something, you might want to sit Deshaun Watson this week against Pittsburgh. The next sit, and this might be, until proven otherwise, I think you're going to have to sit Baker Mayfield. He doesn't have a great matchup against Washington. It's not terrible, but Baker Mayfield is just not where you need him to be from a fantasy perspective. I think from a real football perspective, right? The win against the Bengals, so I think you're sitting Baker Mayfield this week. To the sleeper. So this one's interesting because it's not a great matchup at Arizona, right? They've got a pretty good defense there. They're going to put some pressure on him. They have a pretty good secondary. But Matthew Stafford also looks to be one of those, you notice a trend here, right? With guys coming off injuries and kind of getting their legs back in. Week 3 would have been, assume week 1 and week 2 was like preseason. Again, I talked about this on the podcast last week. You're going to see the good teams start to be better. You're going to see them start to separate themselves from the haves and the have-nots. So look for Matthew Stafford to go back to kind of that MVP feeling quarterback that he was last year before he got injured. So look for him as a sleeper. So maybe that's if you have Matthew Stafford on the bench, or is it available on a waiver wire where you're in a league that doesn't take a lot of QBs. Look for Matthew Stafford to maybe replace Deshaun Watson in your lineup. And then our boom or bust. So let's start with the boom, right? Let's start on a positive. I was not high on him at all. I didn't like the contract he was given in the offseason. I wasn't a fan of his when he was in Miami, but maybe Miami was the problem more than he was the problem. Ryan Tannehill and the Tennessee Titans are throwing the ball. They seem to be committed to throwing the ball, and I think against Minnesota, who's looking to be terrible, right? That fourth quarter, their defense I don't know what's happening up there in Minnesota, but look for Ryan Tannehill to have a boom game this week against Minnesota. My bust, and this one, another one that might surprise you, because typically he's a solid fantasy player, although when he's on the road, not as much. But he's at home playing against Green Bay, and I don't know, something seemed off against Las Vegas and the Raiders, and I think Drew Brees might be someone you got to watch out for. So be careful. He's got a lot of bust potential this week. To the questions. So for the first question, should I drop Darius Slayton? Depends. I probably need a follow-up. So, John, send me who are your other wide receivers, because in a PPR league, Darius Slayton, I think I said it in week 1, he's going to be the better option, I think, than Sterling Shepard. I think he's got more upside in fantasy, but obviously with Daniel Jones and that Giants team, it's not going to be great. However, you know my philosophy. Teams that are going to be losing a lot, like the Giants, who are going to be losing a lot, they're going to be down in games, and they're going to have to throw the ball a lot, especially now with that Saquon Barkley injury, right? Who are their running backs now are going to be Devontae Freeman and Dion Lewis, probably the two wide receivers there. He's going to be the guy, right? Darius Slayton's going to be the guy, because they're going to be late in games and they're going to be throwing the ball a lot. So I wouldn't drop him unless you're really strong at wide receiver and you want to make a move for somebody else, right? Then that's different. But I think I'd stick with Darius Slayton and see kind of where that goes with the Giants. Back to our starts. So to the running backs. Start of the week. I love this guy. As long as he is – all right, let's pause actually. So, John, Robbie Anderson, Keelan Cole, Marvin Jones are your other wide receivers. Yeah, keep Darius Slayton. You're going to need him. And obviously take a look at the waiver wire and see what can happen there. See who's available. So back to the starts. Running back, James Conner versus that Houston team, right? So I already told you Ben Roethlisberger's a definite start. This game's going to probably be pretty high scoring for Pittsburgh side. So look for James Conner. As long as James Conner is healthy, when Ben Roethlisberger is the quarterback and James Conner is healthy, he's going to have a lot of opportunities to run the ball. It spreads the field open and it gives him running lanes, right? We saw what he did, I want to say 2 years ago, when they thought, oh, Le'Veon Bell's gone. What are they going to do? James Conner stepped right in and looked like a beast, as long as he's healthy. So he's dangerous, right? Because he is a little bit injury prone. So if he does get hurt, he's already had an injury this season. He's hit or miss, but if he's playing, you start James Conner. The second one, he killed me. He killed me because I had him on bust alert, and then Jacksonville cut him and would put him on I don't know alert. And then he signed, obviously, with Tampa Bay in kind of this three-headed monster in Tampa Bay. But he's turned out to be the guy. So I'm good starting Leonard Fournette against Denver this week. I think the Bucs are going to be they're going to win that game, but they're also going to be up in that game. And when they're up in the third and fourth quarter, right, Leonard Fournette and Ronald Jones, for that matter, are going to get a lot of touches running up the clock. Look for that game to be a bit of a blowout. Sit on your running backs. So the first one, and this one pains me, really pains me, because Todd Gurley was the man, and he's just not anymore. And against Chicago's defense, that Atlanta team just, I don't know, do they come back from that collapse against Dallas, or do they come back stronger, or do they just completely just give up. Either way, I think Todd Gurley is not one that you should keep. I'd sit Todd Gurley, look to trade Todd Gurley. Do what you can to get rid of Todd Gurley. The other one, so this is another one where, a lot of upside coming into the season, a lot of talk about J.K. Dobbins. It looks like a good matchup on paper against Kansas City, right? Because not the good defense, not great defense. But Baltimore's really started to spread the ball around in the backfield. It's actually hurt Mark Ingram, as you know. But it also hurts J.K. Dobbins. And then Gus Edwards, I think, was the number one rusher for most touches last week for Baltimore. So they've got playoff aspirations. They've got Super Bowl aspirations. They want to keep all the running backs healthy and ready for the playoffs, because that's really what's important to them. They're a really good team. So when you got 3 capable running backs there in Baltimore, it's kind of hard to trust any of them. So I'd actually sit J.K. Dobbins this week. Our boom or bust, our sleeper pick. So sleeper, I don't know if this one's really a sleeper because he had 8 catches for 74 yards last week. And that's, if you're in a PPR league, that's fantastic. And now obviously with Christian McCaffrey getting hurt, Mike Davis is someone who I think's, again, a tough matchup against the Chargers, but I think he's going to get, especially in PPR leagues, he's going to get his touches, his receptions, probably throwing a touchdown there too. So he's going to be a good, if you didn't pick him up on your waiver wire, if he's somehow still available on your waiver wire, pick up Mike Davis. Good opportunity for him this week, although a tough matchup, maybe a little bit better kind of going forward after this week as well. Then now to our boom or bust. So I'm going to start with the bust this time. I thought week 1 might have been just a fluke, and I think I might have been right there. David Johnson at Pittsburgh, right? Again, good defense, bad matchup for David Johnson. So be careful on David Johnson. He's going to be a bust this week. Our boom. So this is one that, again, if he's available, and we're seeing actually in quite a few leagues he is still available, which is odd. So you should pick him up if he is available, is Jerick McKinnon for the 49ers. All the running backs seem to be hurt. So he's the guy that you want to go for because he's going to have a great game this week against the Giants. The Giants are making every running back look good. You saw what David Montgomery did to them last week for the Bears. Look for Jerick McKinnon to have a big game this week. All right, question 2. Robbie Anderson or Allen Robinson? So Allen Robinson's a tough one, right? There's contract issues there in Chicago. Please, I'll say it again. I say this every opportunity I get. Extend Allen Robinson in Chicago. Mitch Trubisky isn't really a quarterback that you want to trust yet, but it's a really good matchup against Atlanta. And so I'd actually go Allen Robinson. I don't like the matchup Robbie Anderson against the Chargers defense. So I'd lean toward Allen Robinson on that one. So to our wide receivers, and we're actually going to talk about both those guys here. So I'll repeat myself a little bit. So our first start at the wide receiver position, we're going to go with Deontay Johnson. So you remember the pre-season show, we talked about who are those guys that you should look for later in the draft that you could be able to kind of pick up really late in the draft, or maybe even off the waiver wire. First week you might go undrafted. I didn't think this guy would go undrafted, but Deontay Johnson is one where Pittsburgh throws the ball enough. Even though they have Juju and I think James Washington, Deontay Johnson is showing that he's very capable of getting his touches, getting his opportunities in that offense. They've been able to sustain 3 wide receivers in that offense for fantasy anyways before. So Deontay Johnson is a start this week. I already talked about Allen Robinson at Atlanta. Atlanta has gotten torched by Tyler Lockett, DK Metcalf, CeeDee Lamb, Amari Cooper, right? Over the first 2 weeks, every wide receiver that's gone up against Atlanta has had a big day. So I'd go Allen Robinson 100% in that game against Atlanta. Sits, if he plays, I know he's kind of been banged up in and out of the lineup. Kind of that's his MO for his entire career. I'm sitting Will Fuller at Pittsburgh. Like I said, that Pittsburgh defense, I'm staying away from any of those Houston Texans. Deshaun Watson, Will Fuller, just kind of stay away from those guys this week if you can. My second sit, so which answers the question really well, Robbie Anderson at the Chargers. He's a sit this week. And for sleepers, now this, I'm going to put, there's a caveat to this one. If Kenny Golladay is healthy for Detroit, even though it's a bad matchup against Arizona, start Kenny Golladay. If he's healthy, I'll say it again, start Kenny Golladay. He and Matthew Stafford, you're hating them right now. Obviously, Galladay's been hurt. Stafford hasn't looked that great. Weeks 3, 4, 5, again, if healthy, Kenny Golladay and Matthew Stafford are going to start to look like what they did last year, which was really, really good. So go ahead and start Kenny Golladay if he's healthy. Boom. I think he's back. I know it's only been 2 weeks, but I think Keenan Allen went from, he's not going to have a good year. Who knows what's going to happen with that Chargers offense. We're not so sure about Tyrod Taylor. And then obviously the horrible, I think the trainer punctured Tyrod Taylor's lung. Justin Herbert comes in. And that offense, I think, has new life. I know it was a loss, but the Chargers looked good. And I think that offense is going to start to pick up. And I think the two people who are going to get the most out of that is going to be Keenan Allen. Someone just messaged me, said that they traded Keenan Allen to me. Yes, you did. Thank you very much. Keenan Allen is going to have a big game this week. He's going to have I think it's going to be his boom game. You saw last week, he had a pretty good game, more so in PPR leagues. That's always been the tough thing with Keenan Allen. He's kind of like Julio Jones, light version, where he gets a lot of receptions, lots of yards, which is great for PPR. And touchdowns are kind of hit and miss, so you got to be careful with that if you're in a standard league. And then our bust is really actually too bad because he's a really good receiver. He just hasn't found, again, had an injury last year and hasn't really kind of found his groove back with Jared Goff. So look for Cooper Kupp if you have him in your lineup to be a bust this week. So again, that good matchup against a good Buffalo defense. Stay away from Cooper Kupp this week if you can. Question 3. So we had a couple of questions that actually came in for these same kind of three tight ends. It was Hurst, Schultz, and Gesicki. So if you got Gesicki, right, week 2 was his breakout game. So Gesicki's your guy to start if you have the 3. For those that gave me Hurst or Schultz, I'm probably still going with Hurst over Schultz. Dallas's offense has a lot of mouths to feed, right? With CeeDee Lamb, Amari Cooper, Ezekiel Elliott. Like, there's a lot of people on that team, so I don't think Schultz is going to be sustainable at tight end. And tight end's always been hard. I think this year, so far, we've had some better tight end as far as fantasy goes, numbers, than last year. Last year was horrible for tight ends. You had guys like TJ Hawkinson go for 30 points in week 1, and then I think scored 30 points the rest of the season, right? So it was tough with tight ends. This year, I think it's starting to even out a little bit. Teams are trying to use their tight ends a little bit more. But I would stay away from Schultz for now with that Dallas offense. Okay, which brings us, let's do another question actually. Malcolm Brown or Henderson, so the Rams running backs. Who's healthy? If Malcolm Brown's healthy, play him. If he's not, Henderson. Obviously, they had injuries to Cam Akers, so I think he's kind of out of the mix. I don't like the Rams' backfield just in general, but if I have to just go with the one who's more healthy, I think one had a pinky injury, so stay away from that one if you can. But I'd probably go Henderson. Like if I had to start one, I'd start Henderson this week. Tight ends. So tight ends, start them. So I already talked about Mike Gesicki. Kind of had his breakout game in week 2. I think you're going to see a lot more of Gesicki against the Jags this week. He's a definite start. Now this one again. There's been a lot of injuries this year so far, so you got to be careful. But Jonnu Smith of the Titans, if healthy, start Smith. If not healthy, obviously don't. But if he's healthy, he's a definite start. I think for the rest of your season, you've found a number 1 tight end there if healthy. On the sit side of things, Austin Hooper it's not a terrible matchup for Cleveland against Washington. I really don't like the Cleveland's offense when it comes to tight ends. I don't trust Baker Mayfield, so I would definitely sit Austin Hooper this week. Let me pause for a second. Kittle, question on George Kittle. George Kittle, I believe, is actually still going to be out this week. So if he's out, obviously you got to sit him, and it looks like he is going to sit unless he has a miraculous kind of turnaround in his health from his ankle injury from week 1. But he should be good to go in week 4. So Austin Hooper's a sit. This one might be a sit / drop / if you can find someone who's nostalgic, trade him away. Rob Gronkowski of Tampa Bay. Again, too many weapons there. He probably should be their second, if not third, tight end option behind O.J. Howard and Cameron Brate. So Gronk is out, and obviously you have Godwin back. Mike Evans is there, right? Leonard Fournette's going to be running the ball. Obviously Ronald Jones running the ball. Just, I think, too many mouths to feed for Gronk to get, to really get any fantasy value. From a real football perspective, tail end of the year, I think he's going to play a bigger role. But right now for fantasy, he's not your tight end to go with. Sleeper. Okay, I like this one because I hated this draft pick, and I hated the draft pick because I said that the Cincinnati Bengals need probably about 14, 15 things, and Joe Burrow can't come in and be their savior. He's going to be scrambling for his life behind that offensive line, which he is. However, he's shown to be good at scrambling for his life, and he's made some great plays, and he's looked really good. He's looked, if they can next year in the next draft in free agency bring in some offensive line help and some defensive help and some special teams help, right? He's going to be their quarterback for the next 10 years if he can stay alive. That being said, who's my tight end sleeper? It's Drew Sample. So that's the one thing when you're scrambling for your life, you can't go deep all the time. We saw one of the plays where he kind of rolled out to the right and tried to go deep and got killed by one of the Cleveland defenders. But when you are scrambling, what do? You dump it off to your running backs. You go to your safety valve, your tight end, CJ, this regular starting tight end for the Bengals. His name is escaping around, CJ Ozoma or something like that. He's out. So Drew Sample's going to get those receptions. Look for him to have a good tight end game in fantasy as a sleeper. So keep an eye on Drew Sample. He should be available on your waiver wire as well. Boom, bust at the tight end. This one's you're gonna find this one. You're gonna laugh at me maybe for this one, but look for Noah Fant. I know what you're saying. Noah Fant's had a good season for all the bad things that's been happening to Denver. He's had a good season so far at the tight end position, and you're right, he has. And why do I think he's going to boom against Tampa Bay is, again, you have Drew Lock's hurt, so new quarterback's coming in. What's he going to do? He's going to make the safe play probably as much as possible, and that's to his tight end. And so Noah Fant's going to get, I think, a heavy workload this week. So he should have a nice boom week. And then your bust, this one's pretty easy. Evan Ingram against the San Francisco defense, right? The Giants aren't going to score many points. They're not going to put up a lot of yards. Look for this to be actually a lower scoring game than you think, just with Jimmy Garoppolo, depending on his ability if he comes back, because he's also dealing with a little bit of an injury. So watch out for Jimmy Garoppolo if he's going to play or not. If he doesn't play, right, expect it to be a really low scoring game. A lot. Back to my Jerick McKinnon comment for the boom for him. They're going to run the ball a lot, trust their defense, try to keep the score low, which doesn't bode well for any Giants players in fantasy anyways. And then let's see. Last question. Should I play Keelan Cole? No. Too quick of an answer? Yeah, maybe? Yeah, no. I think the only thing you can really rely on right now, and I don't know if it's going to be long term, but I think the only thing you can really rely on right now for the Jags is James Robinson at the running back position. Other than that, I think you've seen the best of what you're going to see out of the Jags this year. I came in saying that the Jags, were going to be terrible, and I said in week 1 the Colts were going to run all over them, and they didn't. The Colts actually lost. In week 2, they played really well. However, I think you're going to see them kind of get back to snap back to reality, if you will. Consider week 1 and week 2, like I said, like preseason games, right? You saw the rust. You saw the rust in Tom Brady in week 1. You saw, Cam Newton had a hard time throwing the ball in week 1, but then in week 2, right? That last drive where I still think he should have thrown instead of tried to run it in. That's a bad play call by Josh McDaniels. That's not Cam Newton's fault. But he was really accurate, especially in that fourth quarter when he should have been tired, and you would think that he'd start to get a little sloppy. He looked really good. So you're seeing a lot of those guys start to kind of knock the rust off. So you're going to see the Jags kind of take that dip, and the better teams are going to start taking advantage of that. So no, I would not start Keelan Cole. So that's it for our startums, situms, booms, and busts, and our questions. Let me see if there's any more that have rolled in. If not, we're going to call it a night. But you can always send me your questions either through Instagram or Twitter. You can find me at sports_fluent, or you can email me directly at anthonyk@sportsfluent.com, and I'll get back to you and let you know my fantasy advice. Don't forget, later on tonight, look for my pick for Thursday night's game, and on Saturday night, the pick for the entire slate of games. Fingers crossed, we're going to go 16-0 again. Maybe this time we'll put some money on it, so we'll probably go 0-16. But again, send me your questions. Talk to you soon, guys.